It's the Accounting Influencers podcast with me, Rob Brown, another episode with one of the world's top gurus on change. This is a show where we bring in personalities and thought leaders and practitioners and consultants and experts to tell you, accounting and finance professionals and the fintech people that surround them, what is happening and what to make of what is happening. I'm thrilled to have back with me today for the second time, Hannah Munro. Good day to you.
Hey, Rob, it's so awesome to be back.
Hannah, we've already recorded a show with you, and in that show, it's almost a change and transformation part one. We talked about why change is hard, the different kind of responses to change. Just summarize the kind of things we talked about on that recording, and we'll put a link to it in our show notes.
Yeah, so we talked about how change is inevitable, and what's also very interesting is that change is getting faster. The pace of change is accelerating. We talked about volatility. We talked about uncertainty, and how the whole VUCA piece is actually driving this need to shift. The other thing we did say is that change is not bad, right? There's always a silver lining to be found, and it actually gives us in finance a real opportunity to step up and elevate the work that we do.
Yeah, and this show goes out to accountants in industry and accountants in practice. You've got a podcast, CFO 4.0. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. You're interviewing finance and accounting people all the time about what they're going through. We do know in this very fast-paced world that change is inevitable. We totally get that. And you're going to talk to us in this episode about how we can adapt a little bit better, be a bit more agile, and be not just a prisoner of change, but even a driver and embracer of change. That's what we're all about today. So remind us what change and transformation actually are, Hannah.
So change and transformation is all about a shift from one state to another. And I'm always really keen to make sure that we reinforce the fact that transformation is a journey. I think if you feel like it's something short term that you're going to suffer through and then you're never going to have to change again, you're probably living in the wrong century. So this is an incredible time to be involved in finance in particular, but it is a journey. There is a lot going on, and it's going to continue to develop for some time.
Yeah, and with ITA Solutions, you're a change consultancy, I guess. Talk to us about the kind of work you do on a day-to-day basis and who you work with.
Yeah, so we tend to work with fast-growing small and mid-sized businesses to help them reorientate their processes, their people, and their technology. We primarily work with Sage software because that's our tool of choice. But actually, a lot of the things I talk about is applicable to any technology, and it's all about changing and creating this automated finance team that gives rapid and accurate insights for a business, so that again finance becomes that right hand man at the table and giving that advice and guidance to the rest of the organization.
We talked last time about some of the types of change, maybe the cultural change, the work-life balance, the personal change, the technology change. If there is a change project on the horizon, how can we be ready for it? That's a big part of success, isn't it, in transformation projects?
Yeah, and what's really interesting and what I found slightly scary, especially doing the work I do, is how many transformation projects actually fail. I think there were some scary statistics circulated by one of the big consultancies around how 70% of transformations fail. Now, and I know, incredible statistic. And like all statistics, you need to put that data into context. And I think the important part of how they stated that fact was they said it failed to achieve its objectives. So my one question is that going into that project, did all of those 70% that failed, did they even know what their objectives were? So that's my first hint and tip, is to make sure that before you start any kind of change and transformation projects, you know the reason for change. How are you going to measure success on the other side, and why are you doing it in the first place?
That's a really good point. I'm thinking back to my time as a maths teacher. 3 times 4 isn't 10. So you know immediately when that process has gone wrong. There is a very defined objective and a very correct answer, and it's black and it's white. But with change, arriving at a position of success, often it's intangible. There are loads of different facets to it. So getting clarity on what success looks like, that becomes a key factor in a change project. I'm fond of the question, if we were to look back in 12 months or 3 years or however long this project is, and this has been successful or it hasn't been successful, what will have been the main reasons? Do you work like that with your clients, looking back?
Yeah, so we do internally. We like to sit down and go sort of, do the review stage, which is like what worked, what didn't, what would we do differently next time, right?
Once
so we always ask. Yeah, once it's happened.
Do you project that forward then? You say, look, let's imagine we're all sat in this boardroom in 12 months. What would need to have happened for this to be successful? That is a way of defining the objectives, perhaps.
Absolutely. So it's in one of our templates that we use. The very first question when we go into a scope and a conversation with a customer is, tell me how you are going to measure my success. What is it that you need to have tangibly in your hands, or what is the outcome and the KPI that you're going to measure me against in 12 months? Because that's the piece that I focus on all the way through. And if you've ever heard the phrase, does it make the boat go faster? You have to keep asking you that question. And if at any point you go, is this still the right objective for whatever reason? Because you said 12 months, but 12 months is a long time in business, right? So you need to constantly reassess. Am I solving the problem? What is the problem I was planning on solving? How am I measuring success? And is that problem still valid? Is it still something that I need to think about?
I'm thinking of a change project that an accounting practice underwent just last year, where they brought a new CRM system into the firm. And in defining the objectives, their primary objective was that everyone in the firm would use the CRM system. And we would get better sight on who's doing what with which clients and what product lines and services were offering to which clients. But they missed some very important elements of that. For instance, some firms buy technology because it suits the leaders that buy it and the price is right and they like the people selling it and the vendors do a really good sales job. Some buy technology because it fits a gap that they've got, but they don't think too much about everything else it's fitting with. Some buy technology for the client experience, so they do it with the clients in mind. Some do it with their staff in mind. Well, this has got the best chance of our staff adopting the technology. And so they didn't really get a handle on the best technology to buy and what would fulfill the right kind of objectives. And they just had this very vague sense of everyone will use it. That's flawed, isn't it?
It is, and it isn't, right? So I find it really interesting. So the objective is that they wanted one place where they could see everything that was going on with a customer, right? In order to make that successful, your team need to use it and buy into it. So if they aren't bought into it, it never achieved its objectives because things weren't being blocked. Right. So that's an interesting conundrum in itself, even when you're measuring objectives. But the second thing is that what often happens is people blame the technology for not achieving the outcomes. And actually, what I very often find is that people spend almost too much time choosing technology and not enough time planning how they're going to implement it. And I think that for me is again why lots of implementation projects fail, is because they will have a 200-point checklist very often with the reasons for change, or you'll see the other extreme. And as you said, Rob, it's someone at the top has gone, I like this piece of software, I want to use it. But actually, part of choosing a good software is also about choosing a good partner and an implementation methodology that works for you and the business that you're implementing into. And again, I feel like very often people go in expecting a software to work exactly the way that they currently work, and you don't choose it for that, because if you want to work exactly the way you've always worked, then you've not changed and you've not transformed, you've just shifted into a digital landscape.
And you're a fan of change shouldn't be tech driven.
Absolutely. So I have a lot of conversations with people and they'll come in and they'll say, right, we need this. And I go, why? And they go, because this and this. I said, well, even if I automated that process for you, right? It's still a bad process. A process is a bad process is a bad process, whether a piece of technology is doing that process or not. So there are four actually key components to any successful change and transformation project in today's age, right? One is, of course, technology. You have to have good technology. If you put, think of this as the four legs of the stool, right? Any one of these go, you'll feel a bit wobbly. Two of them go and you're in trouble. Right. So first one is technology. Second one is process. You have to be willing to adapt your processes to technology. There is a historical tendency, and I think this is definitely changing now, but historically you put a piece of software in and you changed it, you developed it, you did those, you got a team of developers to tweak a screen or what have you. That is not sustainable in this day and age because technology is changing so much. As soon as you've developed something, you are stuck with it, and very often it holds back things like upgrades and the ability to take advantage of new features. So making a piece of technology work the way you work particularly if you're going down the development route, is really dangerous. And actually the challenge is, well, why do we work differently to the hundreds of thousands of other users that are using this system? What is it about what we're doing that is so different that we cannot adapt to the technology? And there was I'm trying to remember which council it was, but there was recently a news article about a local council they were implementing. I think it was Oracle, and they come in doing this project, and the reason it failed is they went into it saying that they were going to change their processes and their way of working to adapt to best practice. Yeah. And actually what they all tried to do was make the software change their bad practice. Mm-hmm. So my second thing is process. So we talked about technology, we talked about process. The third thing is data. Every business has a huge amount of data. The volume of data that we as businesses and individuals are processing right now is huge. But just as important is not just the volume, but the robustness and accuracy of that data. And we know this is, in accounting and in finance, but getting hold of where your data is stored, how you are going to share and integrate data across those different systems, which is where, as you said, Rob, that integration comes in, is super important. But it's all about sharing data across systems, having one source of the truth. And if you update it in one system, it updates in another. And last but not least is people. So people have, I genuinely believe that people have an infinite capacity for change when everything around them is perfect. The reality is that we live in an imperfect world. We have kids at home, kids to do the school run with. We have, wives and husbands who have to also work late or are sick. We have mums and dads that are not well, we have to look after. So, and then we have, houses that need painting and, patios that need lighting. So we live in a world where we have to do this massive juggling act, right? And I do feel like that has to be taken into account when you're thinking about an implementation project. You have to make sure you have the right individuals who are in the right place and they have the right amount of time to dedicate to this project. I'm so sorry, Rob, that was a very long segment there.
Well, all the accounting and finance types listening and watching were saying, okay, she said 4, I'm going to write down 4 things here, and she better say 4 things. I don't want any open loops. I'm just thinking, one of the things I do outside my podcasting work is I work with accounting firms to interview their people to tell their stories, Hannah, of why they're a great place to work, because we know about the talent shortage in accounting and finance, and all accounting firm websites tend to look the same. They say the same, they make the same claims and the same promises and promise the same kind of career opportunities. So I interview their people to say, why do you like working there and what's good about it? Now, the question that comes up from time to time is, what do we do with these videos and interviews that you're creating, Rob? And we know they should go on their website as proof. They should go on their social, maybe even on their intranet for their onboarding and everything else. But the problem with putting it on social is that their people don't share it. So as a change project, I often get asked, how can we get our employees to be better advocates for working for our firm? Yes, Rob, you can create the videos and the proof and the evidence and the interviews, but what if we put a post on LinkedIn to say, this is Hannah, she works for us, she's been with us for 5 years, here she is talking about our culture, and it's tumbleweed. and they don't share it. So the question becomes, as a change project, how do we get people into that attitude of wanting to share the great stories that we have in our firm? Just unpack that a bit with your consultancy hat on.
So I think it comes back to the why. So you need to explain why you want them to post it and share it, right? And you need to unpack the personal motivations for that individual. Why should they share it? Right. So you could talk to them about their personal brand, how important it is for their career prospects, and how important social networking is for their career development. And then and then you need to make it so that they understand the process, that they have the right technology to do that. So then you need to run a workshop on, how do you be active on social? Because if they share it and they've got 2 followers, that's not going to have the same impact as if they were a massive advocate or well-known individual on that basis. So you not only want them just to share it once, you want them to be actively on that network and sharing the content, not just this content, but the rest of the snippets that I'm assuming you're going to give them, Rob. Yeah. So, and just as importantly, you need to say how you're going to measure the success. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you could put some rewards around it. Top sharer, most follows, recognize the success, recognize the achievement. Yeah. And that is how I would approach that particular change project.
Yeah, that's very good. How do we look at a change project in terms of its life cycle? I'm thinking, when would somebody bring a Hannah Munro in? You'd want them presumably to bring you in at the beginning before they buy anything, before they decide anything. But I'm sure you get brought in when things are not working or it's all failed and you've got to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and it's like anything. If you've ever done a house reno, Rob, you will know when I say it's better to get it right the first time than having to unpick dodgy wiring for the 10 years afterwards, right? Yeah. I've been in that position and it's not fun. Yeah. And it's the same with change and transformation. You very rarely get multiple opportunities to do something in business, right? If it fails the first time round, the barrier to success is a lot higher. So the first thing I would say to anyone that's even thinking about a change and transformation project is make sure that you give this first go every effort for it to be a success. Don't wait for it to fail and then get advice and guidance, because then you're in a challenge. That being said, is that actually, if the way to rescue those kind of projects is all about building momentum behind the change, especially when there is doubt, there is uncertainty, and there is a negativity around a software and a product, the first thing I do is I show that I am able to help that business or that team move forwards. So small wins. I talk about the snowball effect a lot on my podcast, and it has a massive impact. So find one small thing that you can do as an individual. If you're going in and trying to help somebody else, find something that you can change within a fairly quick time frame that's going to have a small to medium level impact that is going to move the dial forwards. And once you create that one, you have then built that trust, that you've shown that you know what you're doing, and then you can take it forward. So I come in at lots of different stages. I love it when people bring me at the beginning, because I get to start with a clean slate. I don't have to unpack and deal with the challenges that somebody else has created for me. But I also think that it's never too late, but you can't if you keep doing the same thing you've always done in the same way you've always done it. Not only is it the definition of insanity, it's a recipe for transformation failure.
Yeah, and change must also be a factor. Success and change must also be a factor of the people leading it. How do we support people in difficult times?
I think the first and most important thing is you understand people's personal motivations. Right. If you have say you've got a mum with 3 kids, right? She works part-time, expecting her to stay late for 3 months, is unrealistic. So I think the biggest thing is to understand people's personal motivators and make sure they have the capacity for success. How are you thinking about how you're freeing up time? The same with sales. If you think about the CRM project you're talking about, don't do the implementation in January when we're hitting all of the schedules around tax filings and, etc. Let's do it in the quieter season when it's not as horrendous. And there's very rarely a good time, but there's normally a very bad time to implement a particular piece. So picking the right time and finding ways to create capacity is really important. Now, that could be backfilling. And I say backfilling, I am a big believer that you don't outsource implementation. So you don't get somebody that isn't in your business to make decisions about how your business should operate. And actually the statistics back that up. That's really, really important. So you must make sure that the people that do the job and are involved in the job day to day are involved in the project and don't just hand it over to a consultant. The other piece I would say is try not to do everything at once. Historically, change projects and transformation projects were very, they had a real waterfall or big bang approach. They did everything at once. We have this one go live and it's 6 months of preparation and like 3 weeks of hell while you go live, and that is a huge amount of change. So the best way, in my personal opinion, to approach these kind of projects wherever possible, and there are instances where it's not, is to do a more agile approach where you phase it, you create momentum for change, you create enthusiasm and buy-in for change, and also you can flex. You hit a barrier within the business, you can put a pause on a particular phase and say, right, we're just going to delay by 2 months and then we're going to start again. Somebody goes on maternity and you haven't managed to backfill their role. You have more options when you phase and do smaller, more impactful change sprints than when you do everything at once.
There was a very big change project undertaken by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, or the IRS as it would be in the United States, called Making Tax Digital. You'll be very aware of this, Hannah.
I am very aware of that one.
Yeah, but it's a great example of a wonderful idea that was handled totally badly and went very wrong, didn't it? So tell us a little bit about that story as you understand it.
Yeah, as you say, the why. I don't think anyone denied the why behind that change project.
The why was digitizing tax returns, wasn't it, basically?
Yeah, and anyone that's filled in a piece of paper and had to send that off will understand the why behind it. But also, it's not just about the digitization of the tax returns. It's about getting access to the information that sits underneath that tax return, right?
In a more efficient, quicker way, yes.
Yeah. So what they hadn't done is been clear around the objectives. What needs to be automated and technology driven, by when and to whom. They tried to get everyone to move at one point in time, in my personal opinion, rather than doing phased delivery based on business size. Because I think some medium-sized businesses sometimes are easier to shift than smaller businesses. There was also lots of businesses who weren't on any kind of technology. And so all of a sudden, their change journey is a lot bigger than those who are already using an ERP or a software. So I think they were clear on the why. They didn't understand people's personal motivations. They didn't understand their capacity for change. They moved the goalposts way too often. They tried to do it all in a big bang approach. Versus smaller, more chunky aspects. And they didn't make sure that the technology was ready. The ambition that they had outstripped the available technology, which meant that all of the change was crammed into the last few months before the deadline. And that was a problem.
Well, the deadline was put back and seems to be abandoned altogether for the moment. But then they say accountants rarely change anything unless it's mandated by law and any regulatory change. So we did see a lot of scrambling by accountants to get themselves and their clients ready for a Making Tax Digital approach. So we know that accounting finance types are very agile when they want to be and when they're driven by it to do it.
Yeah, but I also think, imagine the work-life balance of all of those accountants.
Yes.
Yeah. So what, like I say, what the government didn't take into account is not just the capacity,
Yes.
the volume of individuals that had to change and businesses that had to change versus the available capacity that was in the accounting and finance arena at that time, as well as the skill set, right? And we haven't talked a lot about that, but the skill set for that, the knowledge wasn't there. So a more staggered release of that MTD piece across industries, across size of business, across regions, would have given way more flexibility and availability within that arena, and also would have meant that there was a series of super users, so individuals that have been through that change and then can advise and guide others, and that's the bit they didn't drive.
You talked about how you're very passionate about change, you love change, you get change. I wonder if you're born that way, and that's a personality trait of Hannah Munro, because there will be, I'm wondering if change and the ability to deal with change is a skill, Hannah, that can be coached, that can be taught, because a talent is innate and you're born with it, but a skill, you can develop it and hone it. What do you think?
I think it's both.
Right.
A bit like leadership. So I think the same about leadership. So I think there are individuals that are natural leaders, that understand communication, that have a presence. But I also think that leadership is a skill that can be taught as well. And I think the same about change.
Right.
And if you knew me as a youngster and a teenager, I'm not sure you would ever think that I would be sitting here on a podcast talking about this. But that for me says a lot. So I think your experiences shape you. So like anything, I think how you grow up, how you're brought up, your experiences. So I spent a lot of time traveling. So being in places that were unfamiliar and having new experiences was something I was comfortable with coming out. So, if I got to stay in one place, I'm like, oh, this is, I need some excitement. What is it? I'm going to pick up a transformation project. So there is something, I think, about experiences shape you, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn to be comfortable with change.
Yeah. A quick question before we bring things to a close. You talked about how you wouldn't want to change your iPhone. You get very attached to it. So do we compartmentalize change? Do we say at work or in that environment, I'm great with change, but in these areas, these are sacrosanct. These are sacred cows. These will not be moved and not be changed. And I'm really uncomfortable there.
Yeah, so I have this is a very personal philosophy, Rob. So I believe that in my life, certain things have to be stable for me to be comfortable, yes. Right? So if my home life is good, my horses are happy, my dogs are well, my husband is not working crazy hours, I have more capacity for change at work and I can throw myself into it. If things happen at home, I have less capacity for change because other things in my life are taking that and I do believe maybe there is a finite capacity to do those things and to live in that world of uncertainty because things at home are uncertain. Maybe I'm just very lucky in that my home and my other parts of my life are fairly stable. So I haven't had, I can focus all of my change energy on work, but it is true that I believe you have to be, as an individual, you have to have some things that are certain that you can believe in and you can trust and are stable. If those things are stable, actually, you then have the time, energy, and capacity to focus on the other bits.
Yeah, that's very good. I'm just thinking of the biblical story where Jesus told the parable about the two men that built a house, and one built his house on sand. And when the storms came and the turbulence of life, it just blew away and fell down. But another built his house on rock. And when you've got those foundations in place and you are, quote, happy at home, you can withstand anything that's thrown at you. That would apply, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's not just about like happy at home. Are you happy in your career and role? Are you happy with are things in, like you say, your family? Are they good? Are you happy in yourself? Are you well? Those that are sick and not healthy, that again, they may struggle with change because they've got other things that are priority to them. So yeah, I love that analogy around building your house on rock. If the foundations are stable, you have the ability to change.
Yeah, very good. Hannah, let's bring this home now. What advice would you give in closing to the accounting and finance professionals listening who know that change is coming? They know that it's here. They want to lead better through change, and they want to be better change agents, change makers, change facilitators. They want to deal with a changing world much more effectively. How would you issue a call to arms for them?
I think the first piece, so I would say, think about what you're changing and why you're changing, and make sure you're really clear on that before you go out into the world. I would also say, don't get distracted by the shiny toy in the shop. Think and make sure that it is tied into those original aims and goals and perspectives. I also would say you cannot over communicate when it comes to change. A lot of the change issues I see out there in the world are because people haven't communicated. And don't limit your communication just to those within your team. Think about your wider audience, your customers, the wider business, the leadership, and be a champion and a PR person for change when you go into it. And finally, make sure that you're clear on where you're at in your change capability and your change capacity. Make sure before you commit to leading or getting involved in a change project that you have the capacity for that change, and also you believe in its mission, because it's a lot easier to make a change when you are genuinely passionate and believe in the outcomes that you're trying to drive.
Well, you are genuinely passionate. Hannah Munro of ITA Solutions, change specialist, transformation experts, and also the CFO 4.0 podcast. It's been a thrill to have you on our show today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, and Rob, you've been amazing. So thank you so much for making my time on the other side of the fence super easy.